All right, I just got this link for the Coinbase Finding Satoshi, and the very first YouTube video that I ever did was on Bitcoin and my thoughts on Bitcoin, and like who is Satoshi was a very small part of that. But I'm interested here. I'm not gonna obviously put the whole thing here, but I want to get some like momentary options for when I could watch it, how I could watch it, how we could talk about it. Anyway, welcome to Work, Wisdom, and Wonder. I'm David. It's been a really long time since I posted anything, but here we are. We're just gonna see what's going on with Finding Satoshi. Yeah, let's do it. Let's watch. So the intro just is a bunch of people who don't want to talk about who, you know, Satoshi Nakamoto might even be. And a bunch of people are like, we don't even want to speculate. Like, maybe not. And there's some gal from the Justice Department, and there's a bunch of other stuff. So they're doing a good job of making the case that this is kind of just like an interesting mystery. And it is kind of an interesting mystery because as the documentary points out, Nakamoto has 1 million, more than 1 million Bitcoin, which means with 1 million Bitcoin at $78,000 a Bitcoin as of the time of this filming, this person is one of the wealthiest humans on the planet. But regardless, they don't seem interested. Nothing, no change, no nothing. Really fascinating. And it raises a whole bunch of questions about who is this person, what are their motivations, what do they want, why did they build it, all those kinds of things. So yeah, really interested to see how this goes. So just some more comments and then we'll come back. All right, so they're commenting now on the way in which Satoshi Nakamoto kind of being this pseudonym and just disappearing has a bunch of religious connotation, which I need to think about this more and actually put together like full thoughts on. This is just initial, you know, boom, this is just what's happening in my brain right this moment. Like this kind of concept of the messianic figure. Michael Saylor calls him a Prometheus, giving fire to mankind. There is like even a bunch of people who are like, we are all Satoshi, and you know, they reveal a statue of, they're not wrong. Like this is how you develop a cult, right? In many ways, right? You have a figure who does something really, really amazing and then doesn't ask for any credit for it and disappears. And that's kind of what's happened with Satoshi. It may be a morbid thought, but part of what I thought might actually be funny is if he, she, they did this thing and then like just like passed away, and now we're like, oh man, like where are they and what would they do and why haven't they touched anything? And actually they're just gone. The religious aspects of this are actually really interesting, and it's not surprising because we are the man who worships. That's what we do. Humans worship. So it's not surprising at all that people take it in a religious direction and see him as a kind of him, she, her, whatever, who knows, as a kind of messianic type figure saving. But right now, like what they haven't explained is how Bitcoin would save necessarily anything. The decentralization and the lack of trust is something that actually humans want. I talked about this in my first video, the very first video that I ever did on YouTube. And yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. So anyway, that's just some additional thoughts. And then, yeah. Okay, this is a hilarious moment. They interview Phil Zimmerman. Philip Zimmerman is the inventor of PGP, which stands for Pretty Good Privacy. And it's for those who don't know, it's like the first publicly available, easy, you know, email encryption software. But his comment on this is hysterical to me because essentially he's like, I thought the government might come after me. And because of that, I wanted to name it something that would make it super ridiculous for the government to come after me for pretty good privacy. I just love that rhetorical move and the foresight to be like, yeah, we're gonna make this an absolute nightmare from a public affairs standpoint if you try to come at me for creating a software called Pretty Good Privacy for that. And then the headlines would be all over the place. But because he named it this, like, you know, Pretty Good Privacy. Who can be against pretty good privacy? Why would the government be against pretty good privacy? So that kind of rhetorical savviness is something that is super missing from the vast majority of humans today. But maybe not the vast majority. Maybe I'm saying that too strongly. But I just love that. I think it's awesome. Pretty good privacy as a barrier against government intervention. Interestingly, to that last note, they do actually come after him. And they come after him because encryption is considered under the International Arms Act, or Arms Export Control Act, as equivalent with Stinger missiles. So releasing it publicly on the internet was illegal and was punishable by up to 51 months in federal prison, which that's just, I mean, it's not that crazy. It doesn't surprise me. But encryption, we think about it now, like everybody has encryption, but at the time, that export control, it was illegal for them to do that. And there's this quote that they put in here, and they didn't really get into it, but Bill Clinton is like, Americans have no right to their own encryption. Fascinating. There's like these crypto wars, things that I didn't realize were happening because, of course, you know, I was alive in the 90s, but I was, you know, playing with Legos and Pokemon. Anyway, really, really fascinating how these things shift over time and yet also kind of don't shift over time. So excited to see more. Okay, so they found this amazing loophole that if you released it online, it was an Export Control Act issue. But if you just printed it and put it on a piece of paper, and this is the genius of government bureaucracy. It's illegal for you to send it over the internet, but it's legal for you to type it down, print it out, and hand it to whoever the heck you want to hand it to. Ridiculous. So an investigation starts. I mean, you're gonna have to watch the movie when it's more widely available. If you already have Coinbase, you can watch this now. It's relatively cheap. It's under $10. I'm not being paid by Coinbase or anything. They probably don't even know I exist. But it's been really interesting thus far. I'm only like a third of the way through. But you have people who are like putting the code on their butt, like tattooing the code on themselves, or wearing shirts and basically being like, see, I'm now a weapon that cannot be exported, right? Just to demonstrate the absurdity of code and math. In this case, just pure cryptography being this kind of, being the same as a weapon. The idea that code could be important to the protection of a nation or whatever, I can actually kind of see, right? It's not as absurd as they're kind of depicting it, but it did come back around because this idea of pretty good privacy rhetorically really helped to get them to drop the case by just demonstrating the kind of absurdity of the strangeness of the various ways of thinking about this. Now, I'm a little more sensitive as a former military member to this idea of like, look, certain things, yeah, they're tools, but they're also weapons. So it's not a hard distinction, and it's actually not hard for anyone to make. Guess what? A hammer is a tool. It's also a weapon. Tools can often be used and often are in ways for which they were not initially designed, but are still capable. And I think that's one of those things that like we fail to have a nuanced view because we think something is either a tool or a weapon. This is probably a little out of scope of talking about Bitcoin, but it's somewhat similar to AI, right? AI is a tool, but also a weapon and can easily be weaponized. Does that make it automatically bad? How much control should we have on it? Like, these are actually much harder questions than most people want to admit. They want to just like take a hardline stance one way or the other. And that's what creates the absurdities, is taking hardline stances like this. So you have the government who's like, it's a weapon and you're going to jail unless you print it on a piece of paper. And you have everyone else who is like, it's just math. You can't put me in jail just for doing math. It's not just math. And it's also ridiculous that you think it's like equivalent to a Stinger missile. Like, there's some in between that we can have here, people. Anyway, super hilarious. Wonderful, like, little piece of history from the 90s that, man, so much fun. I finished the movie, or the documentary. It's a lot more feel-good than you would expect. Yeah, I'm not going to ruin it. I think people actually really should watch it. Again, Coinbase doesn't even know I exist. I'm not getting a dime for this. Heck, probably only 3 people will watch this. But it is actually a kind of hopeful story. I need to sit and think through a little bit more of what I kind of think about it, and before kind of spoiling anything for anybody, because this just came out. Yeah, if you have the chance to watch the documentary, I would like to kind of hear people's thoughts on it. As a Christian, there's a lot of different aspects to this, but the idea of trying to work behind
anonymity to do good versus to work behind anonymity to do, nefarious things is, I think, a perfect example of the ways in which we can, and even me, put too much weight on the method or the specific tool, like anonymity as a tool, as good or bad, instead of thinking about the relationship of why you're using that tool. And it just makes me think there is a sense in which Christians can actually learn a lot from Satoshi Nakamoto, because the idea of being anonymous in order to do something you believe is good and leaving the rest in God's hands is, I think, a good thing. Again, I don't know that that's actually Nakamoto's intent. I think this film kind of points in that direction, and you can make your own decisions after you watch it or hear news about it or anything like that. But I do think that Count von Zinzendorf, I love this quote, and I had it on my website for a really long time. Maybe I'll put it back up there, but it's preach the gospel, die, and be forgotten. Which is ironic because I just quoted who said it, right? Count von Zinzendorf. But it's easy. I'm in academia now. You have to kind of build a name for yourself and try to be this or try to be that, and get people to know you. I was in a play, I'm doing these other things, and there's always this sense of wanting to be known, wanting to be seen, wanting to be heard, and so much of it can just very easily be a trap. So whatever else we take from who Satoshi Nakamoto is or was, I think it's important to think about anonymity a little bit, especially in the good that we do. Do it for God's sake and know that He knows, and if no one else does, then that's good enough. Yeah, a lot on my mind now, a lot to think about. I don't know how it'll sound, honestly. It's actually a good documentary. I'm glad I watched it. I'm thankful for it. Thankful for the work that went into it and folks who put it together, and I'm very impressed with it. It also comes at the time when I just recently flattened all my writing, removed J.D. Wolfrath as my pseudonym for my writing to write under my real name. For multiple reasons, I think there's a kind of an importance of keeping things connected, not being ashamed of the gospel. I think that's where we do need to be kind of open about who we are. But there is a sense in which Jesus talks about, do not do your good deeds before men to be praised by them. But it was good. Also sad. It's a sad story. It's a good story, but it's a sad story. And I'm curious what it'll do. I'm very curious, but also hopeful. There's a little bit of hope in a good story around something like Bitcoin. I think a lot of people have been very negative about it. They don't trust it because of the anonymity. But I think after this, especially when it becomes more available for people to watch, that I think we're going to see a big shift because, well, stories are really powerful. Anyway, I'm signing off for now, but thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Yeah. God bless.